Good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Luda Kopikina with GAI Insights. Welcome to Daily AI News Review, where we rate the news essential, important, and optional. Please follow along at gaiinsights.com/articles, where you can see the articles that we are going to be reviewing live. And please comment and tell us what you think. Today, I have usual crew here. I have John, Ankaj, Adam, and Paul, and we'll go over about six articles today. So let's start with the first one. Ankaj, please.
Sure, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from HPR, and it talks about how agentic AI is already changing the workforce.
Yeah, I thought it's an insightful article. What did you think about this, Adam?
Yeah, I was on the fence. I think I was leaning towards important, but I was between optional and important. It does speak on an important topic. I felt like it was a little light in terms of guidance on the topic itself, more just sort of speaking to it, and it's talking about the role that agents are really going to be playing and the importance of reinventing organizations such that you identify where an agent is really the right answer and where a human is, which is something I think a lot of us have been talking about for quite a while now. They do give 7 critical actions, so there is some, to a degree, actionable steps, but how you actually take those actions, it leaves a lot lacking. So I wasn't sure how much this would just sort of create more churn and confusion around what to do versus actually provide guidance, which is why I was on the fence. But it is a very, very important topic.
Okay, optional/important from Adam. What did you think, John?
Yeah, I was there, and I've gone more toward optional. I mean, if we look at the 7 critical actions, okay, map work tasks and outcomes. Okay, assess AI capability, integrate your hybrid team. All right, redesign your business and workforce model, set legal and ethical ground rules, capture value continuously as it evolves, remain human centric. I don't know; those are pretty generic, and I didn't see a lot in the recommendations that went beyond common sense. So I don't know. I mean, to us, this whole notion of the hybrid workforce we've been talking about for months and months. So I was going to give it an
But
optional.
but but
Hmm?
John, they're not wrong, right? With these
No,
7
they're
steps,
not
they're all
wrong, but
pretty good advice.
yeah. But the thing is, I don't think they deal with any of the complexities, like the fear of the what we're seeing in terms of people being afraid of their jobs taken out, and how are you going to do that? You can do it with compensation or education or promises. I mean, the stuff that One Digital is already doing. Okay, great. How do you actually introduce hybrid work into the workplace? They happen to do it through their hiring system. You know what I mean? Stuff that we've written about is the next stage of what's they're talking about. So I could go for important. I mean, I'm not hard over on it.
Okay. Um, I actually liked the preparing for radical change, where they don't give advice but ask questions that by and large haven't been really answered about attribution of value to AI versus humans. What are the guidelines and oversight that need to be in place? And those are open questions that I think putting it on the thinking model of executives is a good thing. So, what did you think about this, Paul?
Yeah, I was similar to conversation. I mean, I can lean up to important. I mean, I think the reality is that not a lot of AI leaders have done 100+ shows like us. So I do think it was a, basic good reminder. I do agree with John that, I mean, the values in hard edge case studies for deep learning, not just directional stuff. But if you're just starting, to Adam's point, this is a decent 7 things to think about here. Yeah, I think it reinforces the notion this stuff is changing really, really fast, and to think that this is a incremental change in your workforce is incorrect. So I can support important.
Okay, let's go important. Next one, Ankash, please.
Yes. So the next one comes from New York Times, and it talks about how some coders at Amazon say their jobs have begun to resemble warehouse work.
A little bit gloomish article. What did you think about this, John?
Yeah, I thought that it was optional reading. I just I continue to be amazed at how little the people who write these things look at industrial history. I mean, this is so. Uh, anyway, there's a bunch of stuff that I think is more powerful that's out there. Sorry, let me be succinct. I think this article should be optional. It does play on the fears of people who are, I think, rightfully afraid that it will automate their work. I don't think it wrestles to the ground anything in particular about how those dynamics will play out, either economically or politically or whatever. I think it's just on the one hand, on the other hand, kind of article in an area that's obvious. So that's why I would give it I'd give it an optional.
Yeah, it talks about people reviewing code and not writing code, having pressure to actually do it faster and faster and faster. As a result, the whole, how you feel in the workplace changes dramatically. What did you think about this, Adam?
Can I just add one thing? Like, there's a fantastic quote from Karl Marx that says something like, basically, as the worker gets more and more productive, their very work becomes less productive. I mean, becomes less valuable. And so I'd just say this is a dynamic that's been way explored, and this writer doesn't refer to any of it.
Yeah, that is true. Adam, what do you think?
So I was heavily optional as well. And I'll just say, if there are any listening, if you're a software developer and you are not using AI, you deserve to get left behind. You've got to figure this out. I'm not joking, right? This is the reality of it. You want to be more productive. You want to be able to scale. You want to be able to deliver and continue building into the future. You have to get on board with using this as the tool that it is. There's a reason why it's such a powerful use case for it. And it's important that people do understand that. That being said, this article, John nailed it. It just doesn't do anything than really prey on the fears.
Yeah, but what it doesn't do, it all depends on how you use it. If you are an intelligent coder and software developer, you could start using it in more creative ways, automating all the warehousing features that you have to do as well, right? So it's really the matter of how you use it, and it can be extremely creative, can be coming up with new things and how you do it. In the old days, remember, we had these competitions when you take a block of code and show how you can redo it with less lines and more efficiently. So all of these things are open, but the article doesn't talk about it. So I'm also in the optional. Paul, going optional.
Yeah, optional. I mean, 30 years in software development. We've had story points at Jira. Productivity of R&D shop is a 30-year-old debate that we have. A lot of it has to do with managers and how much they push. So optional.
Optional it is. Okay, Ankash, let's do the next one. Thank you.
The next one comes from Anthropic, and it talks about the new capabilities for building agents on Anthropic API.
Yes, Ankash, you have been following this for a while, Anthropic and developments with this vendor. What did you think?
Yes, Luda. So Luda, essentially, Anthropic, they have launched 4 key tools for the developers through their API. So one is a code execution tool, which is their sandbox environment to run code. Then there's a MCP connector to extend usage with different tools. Then there's a files API to extend memory or to use files without having to access them again and again. And then there's a prompt caching tool as well. So I think all 4 features with the release that we saw last week of Claude 4 Opus and Sonnet, I think these, along with those 2 releases, now make Claude a much better suited LLM to work in case of agentic environments. So I think this is important for me.
Okay, important from Ankash. Adam, you work with Claude quite a bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I can support important. I'm not sure how this is significant, but it's significant to the unique subset that I think are very much paying attention right now to what's being delivered. So in some ways it's more more announcements out of the big news that we just reported on late last week. So I in some ways I think I remember the other day when we were talking about Sonnet and Opus 4, thinking that this is actually really in some ways the more important component of that news. I suspect most of the people who need to know this already do. So for an executive, I guess I would question the importance of this to raise it to their level. But I think generally, yeah, I'm still on the fence, honestly, between optional and important. Maybe they'll pass it to their dev teams, but if they're building with this, they're going to know about it. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So optional for Adam. John.
Important.
And why is that?
I think paying attention to some of the major announcements by the major players, especially the ones strongest in their category, because important is still an optional read, right? It's not required reading. It's just suggested reading. So
yeah, I was important, but for slightly different reason. They're really focusing on execution and fast execution to boot. It's about like they extended a way to hold content to an hour. So in other words, everything you feed it, it could hold that content for an hour, and that is focusing on runtime and execution and keeping all the necessary data and information afloat right in the cache. So I thought they were moving quite a bit into supporting production, and for that reason I thought altogether it's important. Paul.
Could I just add one thing that would, I didn't want to kind of go there and take a lot of time, but I mean the whole notion of like brain inspired software development code. You think about they're expanding short-term memory basically, right? And the ability to figure out the semantics. I think one of the really interesting things is going to be what state of processing exists in what environments in what time frame. Like it's going to get very interesting as to, okay, when do you have bound semantics where things have collapsed into an answer? When do you have relationships that sit in a semantic space that we haven't yet processed, and how those two interact? And are those going to be inside the company? Are they going to be in some quasi zone between company and market, or are they going to sit in the market? I mean, I think those are architecturally we're not. I completely agree with you. I think we're in a whole new space.
Yeah.
Because architecturally we haven't dealt with that before.
Right. And I think it will be dynamic parameters, because for my task, I might not want an hour. I might want 15 minutes. So, and it will be dynamic, and it may be settable, or it's dynamic, adjustable by the model. I mean, this will all change. I agree with you, John. Paul, I'm going important. What do you think?
Yeah, important. It's really important for the AI leader to understand that software coding with AI tools is the cutting edge. Anthropic is the cutting edge in that, and Anthropic and OpenAI continue to pull ahead of everyone. Google's pretty close, but they need to watch and understand. So important. And to John's point, John, I think the other thing you're talking about outside the boundaries is so much outside the company boundaries has just been pipes. It's just been API between different processes here. Now we're moving to more and more logic that's not predisposed or predefined, which is a whole new world in my mind.
Yeah, and what's going to be the semantic context to figure out what that means? You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's going to get, and who's got control?
Yeah. Okay, great. Important it is. Let's proceed, Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one comes from McKinsey, and it talks about the new economics of enterprise technology in an AI word.
Yeah, a economics type of article from McKinsey reviewing the investment in IT and labor productivity and how they are connected. Adam, what do you think?
I actually thought this one was a little more important than that first one. I thought I was on the fence. John is a big O. It's a lot of really apparent things, but I felt it actually provided a little more actionable insights than the other article did. Specifically because although at a higher level, it's really talking about the economics of technology and productivity. And maybe it's expected that executives and CEOs have studied this or understand it. I think it did a pretty good job of explaining some of the complexities of it, and also did provide a few really pragmatic things that can be done, like around FinOps and some other practical tools. So at first I was actually completely optional, but then I felt like it offered a little more than that first article we saw today, although that was specific to agents. And I actually threw them both into ChatGPT and asked, like, about the pragmatism and the practicality. And this one actually seemed to come out on top. I could certainly be okay with optional if people feel strongly that way, though.
Okay, John.
Yes.
What do you think?
Let me say, this is the tyranny of the stupid average and the laziness of the counting reporter. Okay.
He's back, Luda. Here's our Dr. John that we know and love.
Look, first of all, this whole area, it's not just McKinsey, this whole area about IT productivity, it doesn't measure consumer surplus. Are you telling me that Gmail isn't better than the U.S. Postal Service? And that shows up nowhere in the productivity statistics. I mean, it's just nuts. And they don't even attempt it. That's the one thing. The other thing is the profitability scatter that they have. The skew of profitability in companies, especially the ones that are software dependent, is so massive. The amount of profit that, the big six are pumping out is just huge. So to put an average in and say it's correlated with IT investment without taking out the massive skew in profitability in IT investment in the context of the hyperscalers is just bad analysis. Anyway, optional, super optional. Look, it'll be familiar. Everybody says, okay, where's the productivity and all that other stuff? It's like, count it right, you morons.
So I was also optional, not for the reasons that John cites, but I didn't get any depth from their advice, and I wasn't sure I agreed with their advice either. Like, run everything like a product, not just IT. It's kind of sort of right, but kind of sort of totally wrong. So it's yeah, I was optional. Paul.
Optional. This is a macro trend analysis. The AI leader needs case studies, needs to find change management tools, needs practical things, and there's nothing out of this that helps him.
Actually, Paul, I would make the case they do need a macro analysis, but they need one that reflects the true competitive dynamics of the market, which is there are increasing returns to scale. There's huge skewing in the context of the application of AI, and that macro analysis is not shown here in the averages. It's telling them that, relative investment on average brings you up, and it doesn't sort out. There's an industry selection issue here, and there's also, I bet if we looked underneath, and I've done some of this research, and there's been some, if you look at actually rigorous research of differential productivity by IT investment, it's an amplifier. So when you get down to the proper population to measure, what happens is you see a skewing in both directions of worse and better performance. So the correlation is completely specious.
Yeah. And John, where are you on how companies think about the percent of IT as a percent of their revenue investment? Should they all be leaning forward to increase that? How much?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the thing is you're substituting digital capital for physical and human capital. And so it should be a bigger percentage of your overall cost base. Also, as I was saying, the rigorous empirical work shows it spreads the performance. So, there's a guy named Owsley who was the guy who baked all the acid for the Grateful Dead, and he created this thing called the Wall of Sound. Right, it was the first, he was a sound engineer and somebody who, anyway, built a lot of acid. Anyway, he created more amplification. That's what technology does. And if you're a lousy guitar player or a lousy band, it makes things worse. So, on a relative basis, yes. The other big thing is that we have to start capitalizing IT spend over a 4-year window as an operating group, because empirically, there's great work out there that shows that the proper amortization schedule for technology-based businesses is 4 years. And that's derived from empirical work that shows how relative investment drives return above the equity fade rate of 5 to 6% at the macro level. So absolutely, I mean, both things need to be done.
Yeah. Vivek is commenting that the article highlights a point about tech debt and short-term thinking. But this is also, Vivek, in my book, it's an important point, but it has been around forever. So, John, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that, look, I think too many of these articles expect too little of the senior executive. When you become a senior executive, your job is to maximize the business of today and to invent the business of tomorrow. And if you're too short-sighted to do that, you ought to get tossed.
Good, good quote. Good quote. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we go optional on this one.
Adam, welcome to the board conversations John's on.
Makes it spicy. Okay, let's go on, Ankash. Thank you.
Okay, the next article that we have is a case study, and it talks about how Blue Note powers intelligent agents for life sciences with Claude.
Yeah, so I'll channel Tim Andrews, who would say this is a puff piece, but and important for pharma and biotech, where Blue Note took a job of documenting all these citations and the like for FDA reports, right? And this is a critical, sort of very tedious job that somebody has to do, and it seems like it did a good job. I'm not that familiar, so I think it's essential for people in this segment to know that this tool exists. There's others as well, but for the general public, I thought it was optional. What did you think, Adam?
Yeah, agreed. I was a little bit on the fence because we actually haven't seen that many use cases that really give people a sense of what you can do with MCP. It's always pretty much down at that really detailed technical level. So I thought it might be nice to highlight it for that reason. But otherwise, I generally agreed with you.
Okay. John, we're going optional here. Maybe important in
No, I was definitely optional.
Definitely optional. Paul, going optional here.
Optional.
Optional. Okay, optional. Let's proceed, Ankash.
Okay, the last one comes from VentureBeat and talks about Google's world model bet, where Google is building the AI operating layer before Microsoft captures the UI.
Yeah, this is following the I/O conference in California that Google announced a whole bunch of stuff that we've reviewed. What did you think about this, John?
Yeah, I was going to make the case for this. I'm on the border between important and essential. And the reason I'd say the essential is I think Google and its architecture, what it's trying to do in terms of its notion of creating this AI first reality. If go back to our previous conversation about who's going to manage the context of the meaning of these agents, and their set of announcements, which are at parity or ahead of the competition, even though they might be later. I think it's important to essential that our AI leader understands what the context of possible architectural futures are, because it drives how you spend your budget today in terms of understanding. And for example, if I were running a big IT shop, I would want a leg in the Bedrock camp, probably using Anthropic and Claude and so forth. I would want a leg in the Microsoft camp, and I would want a leg in the Google camp. And this is I think an okay written but important article in understanding the Google camp. So I was going to give it an essential.
Yeah, I think it's an important message in general that all these players essentially have a vision in mind that they are pursuing and building all the pieces together to enable that vision. That Anthropic is certainly moving in that direction. We see Microsoft certainly focusing on how they orchestrate that environment. So I kind of agree with you. What do you think about this, John? Oh, Paul, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm essential. I mean, I think the miss is from deep mind is such an essential, brilliant person in all things AI, and he's pushing Google. I was so impressed with him when John and I saw him over at the MIT day at Davos, and I think unlike Microsoft, Google has always been cloud centric, out into their thinking here, and because of all those reasons, it's important at least to know where they're going, and I think Google is anyway. So I can support Essential.
Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I was in the important camp. I think we've had a lot of big news out of Google. I hope the message has resounded that certainly if you're a Google shop, you don't have to worry about Google's ability to keep up. I think this sends a pretty strong message that, as John was alluding to, and I think is a great point, in industry, companies need to really think seriously about being multi-cloud, about not just being locked into models, but not being locked into vendors at the cloud level, and really having the IT agility to use whoever is the best or whatever is the best tool for the job. Some of them will compete on performance, some will compete on integration, some will compete on pricing, and you want to be able to just get absolutely the best you can. That's, I think, a little beyond the point of this article itself, which is why it was probably important, not essential, but I could support it as well. It sends a really strong message about a very big race that's happening.
Yeah, and also it's not quite clear in this article. There's a lot of numbers about how much is Google being used, how many tokens, and it's ahead of Microsoft number of times and the like. So Google is certainly pulling ahead in terms of usage, AI usage. But the question is it coming from, where is it coming from?
So Luda, I just saw, I think today, a chart of the search queries for Google DeepMind this year. Mm-hmm. And it would hover around 150,000. I don't know if it was per day or whatever it was, and just in the last few days since this, it's gone up to almost 1 million.
Yeah.
So the amount of attention out in the broader market about Google as a serious player in this space and what Gemini is bringing to market has really just taken off in terms of their mind share and the capital, in terms of people's awareness that they're a serious player.
Yeah, but the question is how many large, mid-size and large enterprises, large specifically, would settle on Google, because they have Microsoft as a platform, as a chosen platform. So that's a question in my mind, but we'll have to see. Okay.
Well, what percent of the market share is Google Cloud Platform?
That's a data. Ankash, do you happen to have that data, that piece of data?
They're third behind AWS and Microsoft.
They're third. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, Adam, to your point, we've certainly seen a lot of anecdotal stuff about the new video, text to video is fantastic. Their Gemini thing over the weekend, where you can create a deep research article and then get infographics from it, is fantastic. Their image is really improved, so they have delivered impressively in the last 60 days.
Yeah,
they're the only enterprise play that is deep in video with YouTube.
Yep. Okay, let's mark it as essential, and let's get the scorecard. Ankash, please.
Yes, Luda, coming right up.
And any announcements, Paul, John?
No, I know Learning Lab this week, but we'll have next week. NetHopper's on. They do private AI. And for people listening, if you haven't gone to YouTube and liked and subscribed, please do. You can search for GAI Insights and find us on YouTube, and that will help us continue to make great content for you.
Great. So today we have 1 essential, 2 importance, and 3 optional. Thank you very much for joining, Vivek, Ram, and commenting. Really appreciate it. Thank you, all the listeners. Please pitch in next time, and we'll see you tomorrow.